Tons of compliments surrounding Chris Dial these days. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Chris Dial with the Basketball Embassy and the United We Hoop podcast. We've got a very special guest today, Mr. R.C. Buford, president of Spurs Sports and Entertainment, maybe more famously known for his role as the general manager of one of the most successful sports franchises. And RC probably gets tired of hearing about that, but he's done a pretty incredible job of seeking out and acquiring and capturing talent globally. And so RC, just wanted to say thanks again for taking some time. I've tried to explain to people in the past how busy you are. And for all I know, you're somewhere else right now too, but thanks for being here.
Looking forward to it, Chris.
All right. So we've got a few things just to chat about today, and wanted to kind of jump right in with the elephant in the room. You know, we're amidst this pandemic and everybody's trying to juggle. And one of the things I see, you know, that I've been fortunate enough to be around you and the organization long enough is you start to develop this understanding and this capacity for what the Spurs way is. You know, it's kind of referred to that in the industry. And, you know, there's a lot of components to that, but in that, you know, you've been tasked with an entirely different set of variables. And not only has the NBA been sort of on the forefront of what to do, you know, in regards with sports and everything else, but the Spurs are usually sort of at the forefront of the NBA. I know that you're leaned on by a lot of different people. So I just wanted to see if you could share maybe a little bit about how, you know, the Spurs have continued to sort of attack challenges and hurdles. You know, there's certain key components there. How has that sort of helped you and helped your team and staff, you know, sort of navigate some of these crazy, you know, ever-changing variables?
Oh, that's an interesting one. You know, I think first the leadership of Pop and the standards that our key, people and personalities have held themselves accountable to over the course of time. You know, Tim Duncan in 19 years as a player was never late one time. He wasn't doing that to demand anything else of anyone else, but it raised the standards for everyone. His ability to put his arm around people in times that are difficult and raise them up through his presence. The diversity of thought and conversation that happens, I think creates an environment that we're not just focused on, you know, on the work that goes on in the gym. I think right now, the issues around social justice are a very important part of our conversations. When we went to Orlando and went into the bubble, our first practice before we went out on the court at all, Pop got the team together and circled up in a bunch of chairs and had probably an hour-long conversation. That was an opportunity for people to share and learn about each other's experiences, about their own understanding, their own experiences, or their own lack of understanding about systematic racism. And I think opening yourselves up to difficult conversations takes the team to different levels. And when you're faced with adversities like we are in our world today, you've got more than just a basketball foundation to lean on.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want to touch on one of the things that you said that I think is important, especially relevant to me personally, and sort of the mission of the nonprofit is that diversity in thought. You know, I think a lot of people struggle. Maybe there's, you know, it's that balance of maybe some of it's ignorance. Maybe, you know, America is a different world and Texas is a different place inside America. And we, you know, I think I've read, you know, recently again, less than 15% of Americans actually have a passport. So, you know, we're in a very fortunate place in the globe. And, but I think people have a hard time understanding why, you know, a diversity of thought and a diversity of context when you're having conversations like the one Pop had with the players, why that's important. And you guys have always made that sort of an underlying priority without actually saying it, you know, and you've got different walks of life and perspectives in that room. How, you know, between the players, the staff, you know, the administration, how does that help? I mean, how does that get us, like you said, over some of these hurdles and obstacles in your mind?
Well, I think while purposeful to open up our organization to the world of basketball, we were also the beneficiaries of the diversity of experiences that were brought by people from Argentina and France and Croatia and Turkey and Australia and Brazil and all the different places, Spain, Italy, all the different places that players who have been in our program have lived. And the experiences that they had were conversations that, you know, you had the lunch bunch with Manu and Tiago and Boris and Patty, where they were very seldom talking about last night's game. They were talking about where they grew up and what their experiences were, and opening themselves up to other people's experiences. And I think that understanding the experiences of others, having empathy for the positions that they've come through, listening to Patty talk about being an Indigenous Australian and the passion that he has for it. I think you're going to see Patty speak out quite a bit throughout our time in Orlando around the issues that he faced growing up and Indigenous Australians continue to face. So making yourselves aware and trying to live in others' shoes, I think helps you understand the privilege that myself grew up in, and not just privilege of lifestyle, but also of opportunity and experience. And that's, I think, what's been the most impactful part of the stories that I'm learning in recent days is the awareness of the pain and the burden that systematic racism can cause for people. And basketball is a great platform for us to break down that and create programming for change.
Completely agree. I think we've been handed an incredible tool, you know, that it's almost a Swiss Army knife of sorts to sort of navigate, you know, obstacles. And you talked about empathy, and Patty is like one of the most empathic people I've ever seen or, you know, been around. And even his, you know, recently, you know, just kind of forking over his salary to help progress things and move the needle. It talks just a lot about him. But you know, we've got a pretty diverse audience, you know, tuning into this and kind of following the work of you know, sports diplomats across the planet. And I think another thing that you said that is maybe worth reiterating a little bit is when it comes to building a team and it comes to building a culture. I think you talked about, you know, these guys, Boris and Tiago and Manu, sitting down, you know, with Patty and just talking about life and really understanding, like, hey, this is where I'm from. This is what life is to me. You know, one of the things I know as a coach, it's tough to always get 5 players in sync or in tune on the floor. And then you've got to rattle a couple of subs in and you hope that they step right in. But I've always felt that basketball, maybe more than a different sport, really gives you an environment for like a bunker mentality, you know, to where I'm not just fighting, you know, for myself. I'm obviously fighting, you know, for the guy or gal to my right or left. But I think understanding and having some empathy for that person, I think there's an internal accountability that comes with that. And I've always, seen that in your teams, and, and Pop's always seen, in my, uh, opinion, he's always seemed to embrace that. And I think it shows when the guys get out and play, and they guard people and they fly around the court and they get on the floor. I think there's a difference between a team that does that, empathically, than a team that doesn't. Would you agree, with that?
For sure. when when you really get to be a great team, there's a lot of trust that comes from knowing that I'm going to take care of my responsibility and the guy next to me is going to take care of his responsibility. And I'm not doing that because there's a hammer being held over my head. I'm doing that because I want all of us to survive and be successful. And me taking care of my responsibility will help the person next to me take care of their responsibility.
Right. No, I completely agree. It's something that we try to implement. And then I think as a coach, or as a manager, as an instructor, as a staff member, I think the challenge is then how do we do that? How do you put that into play, daily? How do you provide environments for your players and for your staff that are conducive to, empathy, that are conducive to understanding? And you guys have just, you've done an incredible job. So I want to use that maybe to liaison a little bit. And we've already brushed on it, but I think, a lot of the folks, that'll get eyes on this and ears on this. A lot of them are in positions abroad, especially RC, where they're being tasked, they're challenged with trying to be a program architect, be it a youth program, maybe in the middle of Belarus, trying to grow up a U12, U14, U16 youth program. It could be, a manager of a national team, and our friends in the Balkans that are going to check in here. Anybody that's tasked with that has to deal with this culture, or the absence of, or trying to integrate a more positive, more forward moving culture into what already exists. To me, not to sound like a broken record, but I know that I will, you guys have managed, you and Pop specifically have managed to create a culture that's just incredible, to the point where if you can't assimilate to that, you probably don't have a place here, but you've made it in a way to where so many different diverse personalities, characteristics can actually assimilate to it, and have successfully for a really long time. And you've shown longevity in that. So I know it's a tough and it's a very broad question, but if there were a few like key ingredients that maybe you were, you travel a ton and let's say you were, in another country and you were asked to observe for a few minutes a day to day, what key ingredients would you look for, would say that almost have to be there if you're going to build that winning culture, that culture of success? What would you say, maybe a couple of nuggets that these folks could focus on?
Well, I think values alignment is a great place to start. And that's not always evident depending on the different levels where you are. But the more you can get people who share similar values with diverse experiences that can broaden the perspective and the conversation, that helps. I think getting people who want to be part of something bigger than themselves is important to create a culture. But having said that, there's not just one way to create culture. There are cultures around the NBA and around the world in basketball that are all different, but that can be successful. The Spanish national team, the Serbian national team, the different places, those cultures are very seldom the same, yet they've all created successful environments. And I'm not leaving out any on purpose, but those are obviously two of the bigger ones. They, more than anything, they have people who want to be part of the program, who want to sacrifice for the benefit of the team. And I think when you can get people that will sacrifice their own interests for the interests of the team, you've got a great opportunity to build culture.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. RC, I've leaned on you for some advices, and some of the work that I've been trying to do across the pond. And you mentioned two of those kind of staple programs in the world, Spain and Serbia. I always tell people, like, if I meet with the new federation, if I'm sitting down with our friends at the Romanian Federation, and they're asking me about, direction or, goals, I always try to return to that issue, that topic that you're discussing, which is identity, and I'll ask Romania, I'll ask Bulgaria, what's your identity? What is your team's identity? Spain and Serbia, if you strip those jerseys off, anybody that watches international basketball, you still know that's Spain, and you still know that's Serbia. And now you can start to recognize, hey, that's Latvia playing, that's Finland playing. Australia's come up with its own identity. Patty's had a lot to do with that. Canada even now has really come up with theirs. So the architects of those youth programs and then those senior programs, they bought into this concept. I would say it might be harder in the NBA to see it, but you can see it with the teams that are doing it right. And when Pop gets the guys playing the way they want, you guys could strip your jerseys off and we would know that's the San Antonio Spurs. How important is it that these architects of these programs, recognize what an identity is, and should coaches, should staff, should administration recollect every once in a while and huddle back up? Hey, what are we trying to do here? What do we want to look like?
I've never looked at it as identity. I think I would call it ethos. The ethos of the program. If you have the opportunity, and it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But if you have the opportunity to create an ethos and that builds into culture, if you look at the great military special forces programs, the SEALs or the Rangers, they all have an ethos. The people come and go, but the ethos of the Navy SEALs never changes. And I think your ability to do that, and then also I think the New Zealand All Blacks do a great job of leaving the jersey in a better place than when you came. Right. And I think if you get people to take responsibility for that ethos and making this better than when you were invited in, that'll go a long way in creating the identity that you're talking about.
I see. When you're trying to get people to do that, leave the jersey better than they found it, how important is it that the leadership in that situation is doing the same thing? Because when I'm around guys,
and I think it's not just the coaches, it's the players, it's the support staff, identifying the narrative that defines that ethos, and then being able to storytell, being able to tell the young guys, here's what it's like, and here's the way we do things, and these are the standards that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. Within the All Blacks probably are the most obvious example of this, but the senior leaders are the ones who clean up the locker room. And that sets an unbelievable example for the young guys, as opposed, you see a lot of foolishness that comes in the NBA where they're making the rookies wear Little Mermaid backpacks. I mean, I'm not sure what that teaches anybody.
Right.
If you, as a leader, set standards that you hold yourself accountable to, now that young, the new entrant into the program understands, okay, this is what is important here.
Well, I'm going to tell this really quick story. You'll probably kick me in the butt next time you see me, but I don't know if you remember the first time that I got to kind of hang out with you pregame. I just got to sort of be a fly on the wall, follow you around for a bit. And I try to explain to people that RC Buford is doing 1,000 things at once all day long, every day. But RC, I've told this story to a bunch of players and coaches across the pond and everywhere, and you probably won't even remember, but we were walking through that back hall. I think game tip off was in about an hour and you still had a million things to do. And you're walking at a New York pace, through this hallway, and there's people hollering at you and you're simultaneously having these different conversations, but it's game day. There's an excitement, everybody's getting ready to go. And as you're walking through this hallway, there's 100 people shaking and moving, and you stop. I almost ran into you. I was trying to keep up with you, and you picked up a grape. It had fallen off of this waiter's tray, taking it probably to a suite or something like that. And you like held it between two fingers. You had your soda in one hand, you had your book in the other. You diverted, you walked over to a trash can, you dropped that thing in, and then you got back on your route and kept going. And it was a little thing, RC, but for me, that was one of the biggest doses of perspective that I've had as a person, much less a professional. And that was, here's this guy that could have whistled and probably had 25 people ready to dive on that grape, because that's just how the people around that organization are. But you didn't. You just stopped, you picked it up, and you went. And I've always, thought about that as sort of a marker of what, leadership is. And it's what you're talking about, I think, is, you've got to be willing to do it throughout. Everybody's got to be willing to do the smallest tasks, the most minute, seemingly minuscule tasks. And if everybody's willing to do that, then you have a chance to achieve, some incredible things. So again, I know you don't like talking about stuff like that, but I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. I want to jump into a little bit maybe lighter subject. We're talking about our friends in Serbia and Spain, and you've been all over the world. What, in terms of basketball being such an international game now, and you guys have been at the forefront of showing the world why, what are some of the things that you enjoy the most about getting out of the States and, getting abroad and taking in a game, and visiting with players and visiting with coaches? What's different about that? What makes, because I know you enjoy it, what makes it so enjoyable?
Like the passion for the game that I love, that's shared with people around the world, and to get to experience their culture and their lives through basketball. I've just been unbelievably fortunate to meet Emir, or to meet coaches from different parts of the world, to go into gyms that are tiny and isolated, but where great coaching is happening. And I think it really opens up the fact that while we think we got it figured out, oftentimes in America, there are people coaching and playing the game really well in a lot of different places. I mean, basketball's taken me 100, all over the world, and every experience is new and different. And from it, I gained so much. I've gained unbelievable relationships. The under 20 World Championship in '97 was in Melbourne, Australia. And some of the best relationships I had were ones that I met there, and also ones that we scouted there. It's the first time I ever met Emir, first time I saw Manu play. And at that time, the under 20 World Championships, there were 7 NBA teams there. That wouldn't be the case now. I mean, I think every time an under 20 tournament, under 18 is being played, you're going to have the entire league there now. So I think it's just an appreciation of, there is really good basketball being played everywhere. There's also some fantastic people. You learn things no matter where you go. The responsibility that the Serbian coaches take on developing the next generation of Serbian coaches is really impactful to see. And you can now see it growing in other communities and cultures as well.
Yeah, no question. And it's hard to explain to somebody that maybe hasn't seen it, up front. But you develop this incredible appreciation. We did a little clinic. You guys were gracious enough to help us out. We had Dave Tellup and Landry Fields and Matt Nielsen share and give some insight on some things during that clinic. One of the guys we had was Nenad Trunic. Nenad was one of the guys in Serbia that was kind of an architect of their youth program's been an assistant, on the senior team. But I didn't know what pride in development was until I met him and actually got to share, a clinic space with him. And then I saw like, okay, it's not only as important, maybe it's more important to these coaches to leave that imprint on the next coach, and that way you create this assembly line of not just culture, but players, and that's why the Serbs are such easy, as a college coach, they're so easy to recruit. So they kind of do everything right. They can shoot it and they can pass it and they see the floor, they understand reads. So I think it's a great point, especially for young coaches and old coaches out there to share and pass it on, to the next group. I want to kind of use that, RC, to just sort of talk about, you've touched on it already, but the Spurs have made, like I said, you especially mentioned 97. I think, was that the year that you came back, or Pop hired you in 97, right?
I came back in 94.
94. So 97, you were probably the director of scouting at that point, international scouting for sure. I think you've done everything. So yeah, you've done it. You've worn every hat. So you're out there, you mentioned 8 teams now. For sure, every team in the league is there. All the EuroLeague teams, obviously, in all these gyms everywhere. But what, I didn't do the stats. I got to guess that you guys have drafted, more internationals, per capita than probably any other team. And now it's, it's a little bit more of a thing. But you talked about diversity in the locker room. You talked about culture. When you talk about good basketball being played across the pond, what are some things that you look for, when you get to sit in that sweat box, in southeastern Turkey with Amir Turam, or when you're, up in the Baltic states, watching an Estonian team, play a Latvian team? What are things that stand out to you? Just like, hey, this is good basketball. This is good coaching.
I think the first thing, the biggest difference in the way players develop internationally than the U.S. is this playing with the shot clock at such a young age. It forces everybody on the court to have to be basketball players. Big guys don't just stand on the post. They've got to be out on the floor. They've got to be in dribble handoffs. They've got to be able to make plays with the basketball that then just teach them to be good basketball players. And I think the more time that you're put in a position to be basketball players, you're going to be better at it. The way the ball moves, the way people move. It's not an isolation game. And then the club system, I think, helps people develop differently than the restrictive rules that either high school or college puts on the time. If people want to be in the gym internationally, they have the opportunity to be there a lot. And I think time in the gym is one of the key influences in becoming a good basketball player.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point. I don't think people realize what a cap we have on our youth. If you want extra time, you have to go find it, outside of your structure, because you're certainly not allowed by rules and regulations to do that. In a lot of ways.
I think the other part of it, the certification program that goes on in the coaching aspects as well, establishes benchmarks and baselines for skill development from the coaching standpoint, which then helps skill development in the players. And we don't have that type of a coaching development program domestically that would help raise the level of developmental programming in our youth basketball.
Right. Yeah, people probably don't understand, a lot of people don't understand that either. I was given a team at 20 years old here in San Antonio to go lead a team. There's no way in heck I should have been leading anybody at 20. And if I had come up in the European system or in the international system with FIBA, then I would have had to go through their FECC courses. I would have had to write. I would have had to get in front of people. I would have been challenged. I would have really been put through the ringer. And I always tell people looking for coaches internationally, if they've got that certificate, they've earned it. They've done a lot. They don't pride themselves on pass rates or anything like. It's not just a certificate they hand out. If you've got it, you did something to get it. And I think the U.S. could probably, learn a lot from a systemic approach, like that to coaching. RC, a couple more things. And again, I just thank you for doing this and spending some time with us today. You've been sort of integral, not just in the growth and the development of the organization, but Spurs have always been so involved in community. And it, for us around here, this is a no-brainer. We're not going to share anything new with somebody from San Antonio listening to this, but abroad, why is it such an important goal for the organization to be a part of the lifeblood, of the community that you guys play in? I mean, you've made it such a deliberate focus for your players to be out in the community, for your staff to be out in the community. You guys are always willing to help. Spurs Give does a ton of things with infrastructure in the city, with development, working with at-risk and underprivileged populations. What does that have to do with, winning a championship?
I think it's more about what it has to do with being good people and developing a well-rounded individual and being an active participant in our communities. We have great support from our community. With that, there comes responsibility. But along with that, it's just Pop's leadership has always focused on not. We're playing basketball. We're not doing rocket science here. We're not doing anything that probably is as relevant as the real important issues in our communities. And the more we can engage in areas of impact that can really change lives, that's where our the gifts that we've been given to be basketball players, to play the game we love, to enjoy what we do with a passion that many people don't get to in their daily lives, and to be able to share that and help raise up the opportunities for others is really why we should be here.
I completely agree. I think, like I said, if you've got this incredible tool and you're not using it, you're definitely wasting it. In basketball, that's kind of a theme to this United We Hoop, kind of mantra, is that we can break down, whatever hurdles you have, whatever variables that might separate us, in the eyes of the world. We can use the game and everything that it teaches us, if we do it right, to sort of overcome and succeed in that. I wanted to ask you, we talked a little bit about the game itself, and you talked about enjoying the international portion of it. We've talked a little bit about play, referencing the Serbs and the Spanish team. The game's definitely changed since, your days at Kansas until now. It's a different game. We used to have this crazy concept that you give it to the biggest, tallest, strongest guy as close to the rim as possible, and that guy was going to, win you the game. And now we've repredicated, towards the 3-point line, and it's changed, transition. It's changed our schematics defensively. Pop coaches defense a little bit different than he did, 25 years ago, just to constantly adapt to this game. Where can the game go from here, in your opinion? I mean, if we're watching this thing 20 years from now, does it look like it does now? Do we cycle back? What do you see potentially as being next for our international game of basketball?
International coaches will figure out the next way that they want to play. The game, I think, is influenced by the way it's officiated, and it's clearly officiated differently internationally and even in different parts of the world. So that'll have an impact on the way teams are playing. I think the NBA game has become too homogenous, and I think there will be coaches who figure out a way to diversify the schemes and the systems to take advantage as defenses adjust to the style of play right now. You don't know where rules changes will go. My guess is that they will be continue. Rules have evolved, at least within our game, over the last 50 years, from 1960 to 2000 or 2005. 35 of the 50 MVPs were big guys. There's been one since, so I think rules will change, coaches will figure things out. I hope we don't become so homogenous. And I think from an NBA standpoint right now, we're probably a little bit too homogenous.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I remember going over to watch some games in Istanbul like in 2008, and I remember thinking like, why aren't they giving it to the postman? They got this monster in there, is 2.5 meters tall, and the first time they finally do give it to him, he just gets killed. I mean, like it's flagrant after flagrant, no call, and they go down the other way, and then they're getting a hand check, 30 feet from the bucket or something. And I said, okay, well, to your point, I wouldn't give it to him either. If he's just going to get tackled in there, we'll take our chances out on the perimeter. And I think you're right. And I think federations have to look at that as well. I think that's one of the things that governing bodies could do a little bit better is educate and to have open conversations with officiating chapters about, hey, this is, here's what our collective goal is. Let's call it this way. I was going to ask you, you guys, I've had the privilege of sitting with you during games, and I'll tell you what, watching the game with you and your front office is not like watching a game. It's an education. How important is it that, successful teams, maybe this gets us out of the youth a little bit and maybe more towards the upper ends of, talent and the totem pole. But how important is it that teams really dissect the way that they're doing things? One thing I've always appreciated about Pop is he's still out there. Pop's still out there on the court, showing people where their hands are supposed to be, and he's moving hips around, and he's talking about first steps out of a trap. He's talking about angles. I think a lot of times we glaze over that, and we just want a player to move from a spot to a different spot, but we're not explaining how important is it that we're still teaching this thing.
I think the first practice of every year, the first drill Pop does is a jump stop and pivot drill. And, I'm sure Tim Duncan, 19 years into it, it's like rolling his eyes going, here I got to start with the free throw line, half court, 3/4 court, jump stop, pivot back, run to the next spot. And I think the message that Pop's sending in that is not necessarily teaching anybody how to pivot, but that we're not going to skip steps. We're going to start with the fundamentals. We're going to continue to build our team from the offense and the defensive ends based on fundamentals. And we're not going to skip steps, and we're never too big to go back and really focus on the little things. And it's just a part of the way Pop coaches. It's the part of the way our development team, Chip England and Will Hardy and Mitch Johnson and Timmy, now to have Timmy back in the gym helping with developmental for young guys is just what a thrill for them. They walk into the gym, they get to get taught by one of the greatest players at his position of all time. That's a real honor and an opportunity.
I think Tim still gets up as many shots as your current bigs on the roster these days. That guy's still in there getting his work in. RC, just a little bit about Pop before we let you get out of here. There's not ever going to be another Greg Popovich. For young coaches, for people new to the game, I try to cherish every single second I get a sound bite from Pop. I get to watch him work. I get to be around him, whether he's yelling at somebody or explaining somebody, or he's got his arm around somebody, or he's doing whatever he does. In your opinion, I mean, we're not going to see another guy like this, are we? We should really be sort of cherishing the time that we have with him, huh?
For sure. I think one of his biggest mantras is get over yourself. And I think as advanced as he's gotten in his career, the accolades, the championships, he's never been full of himself. And I think that's kind of the foundational part that he starts on. He still considers himself a Division III coach from Pomona Pitzer. And just by good fortune, had the ability to move into a different opportunity. His best friend, his guy who was assistant coach at Pomona, who Pop handed the program to in 1988, is still the coach at Pomona. And so that's always a great balance for him. The other part of it is he spends more time developing the personal relationships with people and the caring relationships with people than he does coaching them, so that they understand. They allow him to coach them hard because they know how much he cares for them. And he's not coaching them hard for his ego or for anything other than this is what's best for the team. And what's best for the team is, at the end of the day, best for all of us. And that, the consistency of that message, it never goes away.
It's been a fun, for me, like I said, to be so close to, in proximity, literally growing up here in San Antonio. Go to the Spurs camps as a kid. Pop was an assistant. He'd come in there and play fight me and call out Sean Elliott in his rookie year. And he was just he was everywhere. He knew everybody. He worked his tail off. And then to just, have a front row seat kind of to what this organization has done. And it's fun now because, getting to see guys like Keldon and Lonnie and DeJounte, I think players understand now too what a gift it is to fall into this program. If you're drafted by you guys, having guys like Chip and having guys like Will and Mitch, and these guys are going to develop you, Parker Hines, all these guys down the line, you've got a chance at longevity in the league because of the way that it's done. And I don't think everyone in the league has figured that out yet. Or maybe they have, but they don't have the personnel in.
Chris, we've frozen. Can you hear me?
Intact. But, having that, yeah, there you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'll back up a little bit just in case John needs to edit that. But just talking about being around those young guys, I think the appreciation that they have now, knowing that they've fallen in a really fortunate situation where they will be developed, at this age. I think a lot of coaches, even you hear it across the pond, they'll say, oh, that kid's 20, I'm not going to mess with the shot. I don't think that's the mindset of this organization. This organization has a mindset that you can always be a little bit better. And I think it goes back to Pop, and the way he approaches.
I think it's the consistency of the whole group, though, and our ownership and our investing group really allowed that to happen. And there aren't many places that have had the longevity we have, and shame on us if we don't take advantage of that. Darius Sangalia is a guy now who's having a big influence on the development of some of our young guys, Luka and Jakob, to have a player who played in the NBA, who played at the highest level of the EuroLeague, to play, for national teams in the Olympics and World Championships, like Darius has. That's just a world of experience that he can pass around, along with Timmy, along with Chip. We've been blessed to have really quality teachers be a part of our program. Brett Brown national team coach for Australia, you know. Those guys have, we've been the beneficiary of some amazing people who've helped the program grow together.
You mentioned those, RC, and I'd kick myself if we didn't mention the impact and influence that Becky's had, you know, on the program and, you know, with the players. And she's coming in, you know, as an American, obviously, but played, you know, as a local, you know, in Russia. She comes in with a really diverse mindset, you know, a really diverse set of experiences. And I've really enjoyed watch her take players like Patty through pick and roll reads and talk about footwork and little nuances and niches of the game that only a player, you know, could teach in that way. But you guys have you've assembled such an incredible group, and it's ever changing because they're constantly being picked off, you know, by everybody else in the league. So I know that's a challenge. It's got to be a challenge to kind of re-up, you know, all the time. You lose somebody like Ime, and then you got to get somebody back in, you know, that can fill that role. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I think we've been the beneficiary of great people through the program. And you know, it was funny when Becky joined our coaching staff. Pop and I had no idea that it was going to be a big deal. She played here in town. She had played for our WNBA team. She was injured, and the year she was injured, she couldn't go to Russia during their season. So she rehabbed. The doctor's offices were next door. She started watching practice. Our players, Tony and you know, would be over asking Becky about things, and they'd be out on the court talking together. And then Pop brought her into the coaches' meetings, and Pop brought her into the team meetings, and you know, just as he would other people who might visit. When Coach Messina visited from Europe, or when David Blatt was with Tel Aviv and would visit, Pop oftentimes brought people into their coaching meetings just to have those conversations, and Coach Obradovich and people from all over the world, and it helped our group grow. And so Becky was just kind of there as part of the group, and when she decided she was done playing, it made perfect sense. Let's bring her in as a coach. We didn't think anything about it. We didn't have a press conference. We sent out a press release, and the next day you've got, you know, Good Morning America and a lot of national publications making you know, making us aware of what a big deal this was. And you know, fortunately, Becky's a person that can handle the responsibility of being a first, and will continue to grow.
Yeah. So RC, kind of on that last thing, and I so appreciate this and this conversation. It's always good to talk to you. And, you know, talking about Becky, it wasn't just a national, it was international, you know, in terms of what it meant. And I still run into these old heads, you know, sometimes, or these, you know, super conservative, traditional guys, you know, that are running around in different pockets of the planet. And they'll make a comment to me, because a lot of times I'll get this undue sort of like, oh, Chris is from San Antonio, he's basketball, he must be involved, you know, with the Spurs. And you know, I always have to preface conversation like, guys, I don't work with Pop. He's not my best friend. I don't, you know, but they take San Antonio now with anybody that's even close to a legitimate basketball source, and you're automatically going to get tied, you know, to the Spurs, which is really cool. But they'll make a comment about Becky like, oh, well, coach, does she really do anything? You know, is she doing anything in that, you know, in that organization? And it's such a hard, I always have a hard time. I have to almost hit my reset button before I answer, because I'm in, you know, some of those practices and watching, and she just straight up gets after these guys. And these, like you said, there's such a respect, not only by her colleagues, but the players, you know, that appreciate what she does. But on an international scale, you've got a bunch of young women running around in conservative countries that the sport now is helping empower, you know, these gals to get out and achieve, you know, and not just do that on the court, but do it off the court. It's really leveling, you know, moves like that unintentionally, but really leveling the playing field for young women all over. You guys have hosted and helped the Basketball Embassy host groups we brought a group in from Kosovo, I think a couple of years ago, into practice. Pops in, you guys are in the middle of the season. I mean, it's busy and it's media day, and he's got all these people waiting on him. And you got the poor guy that, is telling Pop, you got to get over it. Because as soon as the practice is over, Pop runs over to this group of kids that are Albanian and Serbians, which aren't supposed to be in the same place at the same time, but because of basketball, they're there. They're in San Antonio. You've got some young women in there. Pop comes over and spends 15 minutes, shakes every single one of their hands, asks them how they're doing, how they like San Antonio, what they, takes questions, all this stuff. And as soon as he peels off of there after pissing off everybody in the media for making him wait so long, Becky runs over there. And, Becky does the same thing. Why are exchanges like that so important? Like, why take the time to, initiate a relationship with some kids that, you probably never see again? Why is that such an important thing? I'm trying to make sure that the audience understands that happens at this level and that it matters,
Well, the relationships that we have with people around the world have been a big part of how our program has grown. And when we visit gyms around the world, we receive that reception, and we owe it to that community to share our home with them. I can't tell you how many times I've been in gyms that you never feel more welcome in anyone's home than we've been. And so the way we've been received around the world, the ability that people have allowed us into their hearts and into their game, into their practices, we know the responsibility of being ambassadors for our game, and it's not about the game, it's about the relationships that we play. It's the ability for Serbs and Albanians to be in the gyms at the same time together, playing a game that hopefully will build bridges and create relationships so that people understand part of being a team is accepting others for who they are, where they are. And the ability for our game to share that is maybe as at the highest level. There's not 25 to 30 people on a pitch. There's not, you're not behind masks. You're not standing far apart from each other. You're next to each other. You're in and out of timeouts. There are just so many interactions that allow us to learn together. And I think that's a real responsibility that our program takes seriously.
I want to thank you again for the time. Thanks for sharing. I know these are crazy times. We really appreciate it. I'll never really be able to express to you how fortunate I've been just to be around you. You do a lot for a lot of people. The organization does a lot for a lot of people. And, we're just so happy to have you on and visiting with us today, and just wanted to wish you guys luck in the bubble and, with whatever's next. And, obviously if there's ever anything that the Basketball Embassy or our family or extended network across the pond can do for you guys, please don't hesitate.
Well, thanks, Chris. I enjoyed it. I'd like to say, just a warm hello and thank you for all the people around the world who've made basketball really special for me. I miss the ability to travel right now, and I can't wait to be in a gym someplace and see the friends that we have around the world.
I hope we get there soon. RC, take care, give the best to the family, and good luck moving forward. We appreciate everything.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, we'll see.
Great, guys. Thank you, RC. That was fantastic.
All right, appreciate it, guys. I got to jump on another Zoom, so.
I figured you did. I'll catch up with you. Thanks.
Hey, Chris. I'm still here. That was great.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll start working on the editing of that, and there's some coughs and some things some just basic stuff I need to kind of clean up. But that was really good.
Gosh, we had this stupid uh, whatever landscaping crew from the city out here just tearing up this alley that I live on, and I'm sure that background noise is
I couldn't hear it at all.
really okay.
No, it was great. Y'all both sounded really clean, so no problems there.
Okay, no worries. No, I think obviously just having him on period is great, but he always says, always seems to say the right thing. So I think
Yeah, no, that was really good. Anything else you need me for right now?
No, I was going to try to sew up Don Showalter. I don't know if you want me to see if Don wants to stick to this week. Try to get him, Thursday or Friday. If you got time, we'd have to do it like this because I've shown no symptoms, but my 14 days won't hit until, mid next week. And
yeah, if you can get him this week, I mean, honestly, other than tomorrow at 3:30, I've got another recording session, but Thursday and Friday, I'm completely open.
Okay. I'll text Don and see what his schedule looks like, and then I'll get back with you guys. Maybe we can grab him on. That would give us our first 4, or if we didn't want him in that order, I can start working on Jennifer Davis, which would be 5, and then figuring out what's next for 6, 7, and 8. I actually kind of had an idea. And we can talk about it later when Mary's around too. But I thought about having a youth panel,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Having a kid, from the States, and then a kid from, I say a kid, I mean, just, a high school, whatever, or it could be younger, but, or maybe we do 2 and we sync them together, maybe 2 15-minute, 2 30, whatever. But basically having one from Sweden, one from, Israel, and one from the States, and then doing, something like that to where we just talk about basketball and kind of what it does. I thought that might be good listening,
Yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds great. And I think for the kids, it would be amazing experience for them too, because they probably have never had a conversation with a peer in a different country. And, so, yeah, I love that idea. I think that's really, really good thinking.
Okay. Well, we'll look at it, and I can work on setting it up. Yeah. So if there's anything else you need, in the meantime, man, let me know. But I'll work on Don, and then we'll just kind of go from there.